I've been standing in front of this camera for 45 minutes trying to figure out what it is that I want to say. So I'm just going to start talking and we'll just follow a stream of consciousness. So I woke up this morning early and I've had this overwhelming sense of I guess, I don't know if you would call it depression or hopelessness, or I guess to sum it all up, what's the point? What is the point of all of this? And you know, it might have something to do with the time of year. This is my least favorite time of year. It's March 28th. It's no longer winter, so you don't have the magic that comes with winter, but it's not yet spring, so you can't do a lot of the things you like to do. You can't go out into the forest and do working with the timber because the ground's too soft and there's still snow, and you can't plant because it's still freezing, and it's almost like this couple months of limbo that always brings. It's kind of a sad time of year for me. So then I was thinking, well, maybe we should take advantage of this time and we can go into the shop or in the house and finish all those undue projects that are constantly nagging on your psyche. And I just didn't, and I started picking out different things that needed to be done, and then the list became so big and so massive that even brought more depression upon me, because then you start thinking, well, what is the point? You know, it's like you paint the house, and then you know that the sun is beating on it, it's deteriorating, and everything is always running down. Everything, you buy a brand new pair of tires and the joy that comes with that, but then there's always a sacrifice, there's always a compromise, and it's taking away your joy that these tires that you bought are they're running down and they're deteriorating, and that's also going to have to be replaced. And so all these little things that you find in your life to bring happiness and contentment, and they give you a little spike, but then it starts running down again, and then you start wondering what the point is. The world is so filled with sadness and hopelessness and fear and danger, and we live under the perpetual death sentence or the doom of impending disease and sickness and death, or maybe even worse than something happened to yourself, but watching a loved one go through a terrible bout with cancer, or the worst thing that could happen to a person, maybe a death of your child from an accident or disease. And when you start looking at all of these things, and what is the point of what we're doing, what is the point of life, and when you look to the future, what is it that we have to look forward to? It's pretty horrible. I've always felt, from the time that I was actually I guess, I don't know, maybe this would have been in early teens or so, I've always felt, it goes back further than that. It goes back to when I was just a child. I've always felt I'm living in a place that I don't belong. I've heard some people say they felt that way, or some people even believe that they are aliens that have been transplanted here. And I'm not going to go down that road. I certainly don't subscribe to any of that, but I do sympathize, and I do understand that feeling of not belonging. And also, I think, in addition to feeling like an outsider or living in a place that is not your home, or you don't belong, the isolation that comes from no one really truly knowing who you are. You can be married to someone, you can have family and friends, and I think it's a very rare thing to have someone in your life that actually knows you, really, really knows you, not what you project and not what you want them to see, but knows you for who you are, that shares in your fears and your trials and your struggles and your insecurities and your shortcomings, and we do so much to mask that. And we put on this armor around us and we don't have, I think many of us don't have the ability to really let people see who we are. And with that brings additional isolation and loneliness. And so, I was struggling with that. And the more I thought about it, the more I just felt worse and worse. And so I thought, okay, well, let's get away from the emotions. Emotions are not reliable, and they're not a good way to make important decisions in your life. Let's look at the facts. But we're not just purely scientific, factual creatures. We're not like Spock, where we can simply make all of our decisions off of what is logical. We have emotions, and they're real, and they do make us feel sad, and they do make us feel happy, and it's just a part of life. So, setting all that aside, I asked myself, what is it that's troubling you? What is it that's so it's making you feel so sad? And I was thinking, I guess it keeps coming back to the pointless of everything. I can come in today and I can organize the shop and clean everything up and maybe fix something that's broken, and it's only going to be broken again. It's only going to need repaired again, and that thing that I clean up or organize is only going to become disorganized. And here we go round and round and round, this perpetual motion of chasing our tail. And for what? What's the purpose of it? Being a person of faith, I've always been very upfront about that. Some people, I guess a lot of folks that maybe are in that same boat would have you believe that they've got everything figured out and that everything is good, and anytime anything bad happens, they just, instead of taking personal responsibility, they just lay it upon, oh, God is just testing me, or this is just a trial that I have to go through. Therefore, turning the blame almost from yourself, from decisions you've made, mistakes you've made, that you are unwilling to own and to commit to, and putting them on God. Well, this is just God testing me. I didn't do anything wrong. So to be able, I have found this morning, it is exceedingly difficult to sit, to almost detach from yourself, look at your life, look at what you're doing and what your goals and ambitions are and what you're doing, and are those the reasons why you're in the position that you are? Let's stop blaming employers. Let's stop blaming other people and circumstances, or some guy that treated us unfairly, or some guy that is taking advantage of it. And let's get rid of all that. Let's ask the hard question and point the finger at ourselves and look at it. What is it that's you're doing that's causing you to be unhappy? And I sat and I thought about it, and I guess what I realized is that this life and this circumstance that we find ourselves in is not the life and not the circumstances that we were designed for. C.S. Lewis talks about this, and he makes a really good analogy. He talks about he likens this life to an engine, and the engine is designed to run off of let's say it's designed to run off petrol or 100 octane gasoline, right? And that's what causes it to work the best and to function the way it was designed. But we don't put that right fuel in there. We try other things. We think, well, we know the engine is designed for this, but we're going to try something different. Let's try a 50-50 mix of ethanol, gas, and diesel. Well, one time I put diesel in a gas engine, and I made it maybe 100 feet out of the parking lot accidentally from the gas station, because it was never designed to run on diesel, and it wouldn't, and it conked out. So when we don't fill our lives with the things that we're intended to run with, we can expect to have the same repercussion. We go forward a little while on the inertia of the original fuel that was given us, and then we end up pulled on the side of the road, conked out with an engine that won't start and a dead battery, because we're running our life with the wrong fuel. And I guess as I'm talking and just thinking about this, I think the reason why I've always felt that I'm not in my home, or I'm not in a place that I belong, is because this world that we live in is separated us from our Creator. So originally we were designed to be walking. I like the early stories. God would come down in the evenings, and would walk with Adam and Eve in the garden and talk with them and answer any questions. You got to remember that these were the first humans. And like children, they started their understanding of the universe and the cosmos, and their understanding of God was very limited, like a child's would be. nothing wrong with that. It was rightfully so, but they have a long way to go. And so he would come down, and I like to imagine that a lot of these questions were answered, and there was a communication, a direct link with God. God was the fuel that was designed to run the human engine. And when we have been separated from God, and that separating, that divider of sin has created this great gulf between us and the fuel that we're caused to run off of, we kind of clunk along and misfire and backfire and go along, and we're constantly trying to find a fuel that is going to work, or something that's going to make us, to give us a purpose. And when we start trying to find a purpose outside of God, I don't think that it exists. And so you'll find in your life that you want to spend less and less time in quiet reflection and thinking. That's why there is such an assault of our senses to spending time in meditation and in prayer, connecting with God. There's still a link. The link is there. We can make that, still maintain that link, kind of a conduit, and we can still receive that fuel. But we don't do it, and it's not necessarily all our fault. I think most of us have the intention when we wake up in the morning, and we're like, let's start the day off right. Let's make a connection. Let's spend some time in reflection. Let's spend some time in reading and prayer. But again, as C.S. Lewis says, these responsibilities and these obligations and these things that we think are so necessary that we have to do, they come rushing at you like roaring lions. I'm paraphrasing there. And they drowned out that still small voice that comes from God telling you that you need to make that connection. You need to pull into the gas station of spirituality in the morning, fill up your tank, and God is telling us, I will give you the fuel that you need to go through the day. But when we don't fill up, and we try to go forward and we try to put something else in that tank, we find out that we're again clunking or knocking and clunking alongside the road, and then we're not working properly. It's amazing how I heard the term years ago, self-medicating, and it's easy to be judgmental to other people when you don't particularly struggle with a vice, and so you see people that are strung out on drugs or heroin or choose whatever that may be, some sort of mania, and it's easy to look down on those folks and think, well, I'm glad that I don't have to do that. It's like the story of that Pharisee. We got the temple, we got the church. Well, I'll paraphrase. We got the church here, and we got this religious guy, supposedly religious as Pharisee, and he's in these great robes and looks really fancy, and he's an important man in the community, and he comes in and to bring his petitions before God, and next to him comes this poor, wretched beggar, and he's probably drunk, and he probably hasn't kept the Sabbath and all these things. And they both, the poor man falls down on his knees and begs God forgiveness. God, forgive me, for I'm a wretched man. I'm not doing as well as I could. And then we have the religious guy, the Pharisee, and he's not worried about himself. He's looking over at this guy groveling on the ground, and his prayer is, thank you, God, that I'm not like this guy over here. And Jesus tells us something at the end of that. I'll tell you what. He says, that guy, that beggar, he left justified. One left justified and one didn't. One, God heard their petition, and one, God didn't hear it because he saw that he was in need. He saw he was able to separate his emotions and his pride and his vanity. And he was able to look at himself in the mirror for truly what he was. So the idea of coming in here and into the shop today and shooting a video and organizing and cleaning up and all these things, and I was thinking, it's just so pointless. It's so pointless because why are we? All right, I got to get back on track here. I'm rambling, I'm ranting. I do apologize. I can't seem to focus my mind on what it is I want to say. I guess we'll close with this. The point is this: for me, is that upon reflecting today, I've realized that this this sense of not belonging, or this sense of being in a strange place, is only natural. in that this is not how it was designed, and this was not intended. This is not how God intended us to live separated from Him. I don't want to go through life trying to chase things and trying to find a substitute for this big empty hole in my heart that's caused by the separation from my Father, from my Creator, with a counterfeit that's always going to end up as ashes in your teeth, as it's been written. And I guess the thing, when I looked at it logically, or as I look at it logically, I have got to understand that this is a temporary condition. It is like visiting a foreign country, and upon being there, and upon your return, say, well, it was a nice place to visit, but I wouldn't want to live there. I don't particularly like living here. I don't like what's coming down the road. I don't like looking forward to the death of my parents. I don't like the fear that comes from worrying about what's going to happen to my children, and will they make good decisions and bad decisions. I don't like the prospect of getting old and becoming feeble and infirmed and relying upon, or being forced to rely upon someone else to look after you. These things are absolutely dreadful. And I'll tell you the truth, if I was not a person of faith and I was an atheist or a non-believer, I don't know how I would get up in the morning. I don't know how I would even get the gumption up to carry on one day longer, when all I had to look forward to was deterioration, decay, disease, and ultimately death. And a lot of misery. There's a lot of misery in this life. There's a lot of more unhappiness than there is happiness. And I guess what helps me, or what's helping me right now to kind of get through this type of thing, is knowing that this is a temporary condition. And that if I can just remain faithful, and I can hold on for just a short time, a few more years, that one day, again, I will be reunited, and I will have access to the proper fuel to run this human condition. And the fact that to have that, as it's been called in the old hymns, that blessed assurance, is, I think, for me, what gives me the hope to get up and to go. And I can truly sympathize and be sympathetic to folks that don't have that foundation, don't have that anchor in life. And I understand much better now why people get into, whether it be alcohol or drugs, because it's so painful, and it fills a person with such despair and hopelessness that any escape that a person could find from that, I get it. I really do. I really do get it. So, in closing here, how many times are we going to close? In closing, I guess the thing that we need to remember, and the thing we need to look forward to, is that we have an advocate. We have someone that is there to help us, and has given us a promise that he promises us that he will give us help in this life. And it's not going to be perfect, and we don't want it to be perfect. If it was perfect and everything was just ideal, then we would have no need to aspire to anything greater. And how often do we find ourselves in a position where we are moderately comfortable? Take a job, for example. Maybe you have a job you don't particularly like, but you are middle management and you're making an income, you can pay for your family, and you do kind of dread it. But the thought of losing that, the thought of taking a risk to get something that would be so much better, you almost become paralyzed by circumstances and fear of change. And so you remain in this place, this no man's land, in this place that you don't really like and you don't really hate. And it is a gray, dreadful existence. And I think that's what this earth is. And so for me, if I have to look, if this is it, if this is all there is, then there is no point for me of going on. I would probably have ended it years ago, but having the promise that this is a temporary thing that I must do, this is a temporary thing that I must go through until I can be reunited, to be put back in the world and be around someone that truly knows me and understands me, that I can have that relationship with, is what inspires me to get up in the morning and to be able to continue. So as I looked at it logically today, I say, yep, it sucks here, it's tough, it's not ideal, but it's also, sorry, Mrs. W came out and asked me a question. But to wrap up, it's a temporary condition. It's something that we have to go to. I've heard the term that I always like that the military guys say they talk about embracing the suck, right? What does embracing the suck mean? Well, maybe it's a march, maybe it's the first thing you have to do, maybe it's something you have to get over with before it can be better. And I think life is the great suck, but it can be good. And if I know there's an end to something, if I know that there is a means to an end and that there's a point to this, then it makes it bearable. Fast forward to the future, when we're in the kingdom and we look back, and you've been in the kingdom with God and you're there 100,000 years, 1,000,000 years or whatever, and we look back in our history, in our memories about this short time we spent on earth, this 50, 60, 70, 80, maybe 90 years at most for most folks, how significant will that be? How important will that be in our lives in the big picture of things? We get so wrapped up, we get so focused on these little things. We don't go out and look at the big picture, the picture, the eternal picture, the picture of looking at it from the perspective of eternity. Benchmade puts a post up about destroying arms, and we're all consumed about that. That's the most important thing, and the hand wringing, and it's just such a big deal. Well, how big of a deal is it right now? And how big of a deal will it be in 20 years? Are you still going to be angry about that? Or Donald Trump being elected president, there are folks that are still upset about that. And how long, how big of it, when it becomes, when an event in our life that's so insignificant when contrasted with eternity, when we devote hours and weeks and days of time of being angry and frustrated about things like that, we have groups of friends in our circle that are no longer friends because they've been made aware that I voted for Donald Trump. It's crazy when you look at the big picture, especially when you see that we're fighting one another. We're at each other's throat, and it is the greatest trick that the devil ever played. Well, the number one trick the best trick that he ever played was convincing people that he didn't exist. And the second most effective thing he's ever done is causing us, who are all being persecuted by him, who the true enemy is, to turn in and to fight one another. And he must just sit up there and just laugh. He doesn't care if your particular sin is heroin or your problem, or he doesn't care if you're addicted to playing hockey or watching sports. As long as you are not looking at the big picture, as long as you're not looking at him and the root of where this unhappiness and this evil comes from, and the reason why we've been separated from God, as long as we're distracted from that, then he's got us. And we go and we live our 70, 80, 90 years, and we go to our grave miserable, diseased, wretched, and clueless, and probably lost, many folks. So what's the point of this life, and what do we need to do? Well, we just need to occupy until he comes, and remember that we are aliens here on a strange planet that's not our home. It's okay to make it as nice as you can and to enjoy yourself the best you can. God doesn't want us to be down here miserable. He knows what we have need of before we ask. But let's remember where the real enemy is, and it's not one another. And to be a little bit kinder and more patient towards one another, and understanding if someone is suffering with a drug addiction, they're trying to fill that hole. If someone is jumping from boyfriend to boyfriend to boyfriend, it's not because they're a bad person, not necessarily, but it's because there's something in them that's lost and missing, and they're trying to fill. And how can you blame someone who's just trying to heal themselves and trying to take away the pain that is ruining their life? For me, the thing that I'm looking forward to about the most is, I guess, being free from this tyranny of constant loom of worry of death, disease, and injury, accident, sadness, heartbreak. To be free from that is it's unimaginable, free from self-consciousness, free from regret, free from the constant burden of mistakes, people who hurt in the past, and things that you wished you could redo that you could never do, relationships that have been affected negatively, or just not living up to the character that God would desire us to have. But more so than that is to be known, truly to have a sympathetic character or a sympathetic God that understands, free of judgment, that can sit next to you and can share in your joy and to share in your misery, share in your trials, is a thing that we don't really, I don't know that we can truly enjoy in this planet. And I'll close with this. I'm going to change directions with this. So I'll give you a personal experience that I had years ago. Mrs. W and I had just gotten married, and man, we hit the ground running. We immediately bought a house. Our family started right away. She became pregnant on our honeymoon, and it went from playtime to serious lifetime. And I had just started a business, and she was working at a real high pressure in a corporate kind of job, and we were remodeling this 100-year-old house, and I was trying to run my business, and what my life consisted of was getting up at like 5 in the morning, working 10, 12 hours a day on my business, and then driving a half hour through traffic immediately to this crummy old house, and remodeling and working from like 5 in the morning till midnight. And it was starting to break down my body was starting to break down just from lack of sleep and just overwork and the pressure and stress. And I felt a huge obligation that was really pressing upon me to be a good father and a good husband. And I had all these things that I wanted to do. And I was leaving this house after anyway, it was a lot of work. And I pulled into the apartment we were staying in my car, and I just sat there in my truck, and I was feeling sorry for myself, and I was complaining to God about how difficult everything was. Feelings, pity, having a pity party, and I was having trouble with my back. My back was giving me trouble, and I was in pain all the time, and I was really close to reaching my breaking point. And I felt misunderstood, and I felt no one really appreciated all the things that I was doing and how hard I was working for the family. And God, I don't know how to explain this, and I'm really reluctant to share this with you. I don't know that I have shared it with very many people apart from my wife, but and I don't like. I think miracles. I think God does miracles, and I do think that He speaks to people maybe in different ways, but that's for you. It's not reliable. Yeah, I may say this, but a lot of people say a lot of things. It was for me, and I'm not saying this to try to evangelize anyone. I'm just telling you what it did for me. And I was sitting there, and I was angry with God, and I was whinging and complaining, and He showed me something that I'll never forget and gives me hope to this day. And I likened to it when I was whining about no one understanding and appreciating what I was doing. I would liken it, he peeled me right there in the car like an onion. All of the layers went away. The insecurities, the regrets, all of the posturing, all of the posing, all of the, hey, look at me, and the fancy clothes, all of those things, whatever it may be, He peeled those away right before my eyes and exposed my heart for what it was. And it showed me, there wasn't any rebuking, there wasn't any anger, there wasn't any condemnation or judgment. There was just compassion. And what it told me was, I see past all of your facades, and I see what's in your heart. I see what's hurting you. I see where your vulnerabilities are. And I am so intimate with you. I know you so well. I would never do anything to exploit those. And I just sat there and I cried, and a sense of peace came upon me that I haven't experienced since, and a healing, and it was it was very encouraging for me, and it was what I needed to have at the time. And I guess that's what I look forward to more than anything, and what's going to give me hope to get past this, this blues time in my life, to remember to just to keep going, that this is a temporary thing, and there is a lot to be thankful for, and there's a lot to be to appreciate and to enjoy this life. Don't get bogged down with all the difficulties. Yes, things are coming that we don't necessarily want, and trials are going to come up. But knowing that God can see me in that way, and He knows what I have need of, and will never put more upon me than I'm able to bear, gives me the ability to lift my head up, to put my boots on, to get up in the morning, and to get back to work, and to live a life that's free of regret, and to face everything head on, knowing that I'm not doing it here alone. So that's it. I don't know why I made this video. I just needed to talk about it, and being a very private person, believe it or not, I guess this is just what I needed to do today. So keep me in your prayers, keep our family in your prayers, and we'll see you guys on the next video.